Hacks. Why do people change their personality around different people? Have you ever noticed that you become a slightly different person depending on who is in the room? With your closest friend, you might talk nonstop, make terrible jokes, and say exactly what you think. Then you walk into a meeting and suddenly you choose every word carefully. Around your family, you may become quieter, more impatient, or strangely defensive. Around someone you have a crush on, you might become unusually confident or completely forget how to behave like yourself. And then there is that strange experience of meeting an old friend after many years and realizing that the version of you they remember seems to come back automatically. Which version is the real you? The funny one? The serious one? The shy one? The confident one? The anxious one? The person who appears when nobody is watching? At first, this seems like a problem of authenticity. We like to imagine that each person has a single, stable personality hidden somewhere inside them. We assume that our job is simply to express that personality consistently. But human beings do not work quite that way. Your personality is not a statue. It is more like a conversation between your memories, your habits, your environment, your expectations, your body, and the people around you. And that creates a fascinating possibility. Maybe changing around different people does not always mean that you are being fake. Maybe it is one of the ways your mind adapts to reality. But there is a darker side to this ability. Sometimes adaptation becomes performance. Sometimes politeness becomes people-pleasing. Sometimes social flexibility becomes losing track of what you actually want. And sometimes the people around us bring out versions of ourselves that we thought had disappeared. So why does this happen? Why can the same person make you feel powerful while another makes you feel small? Why can you be loud in one room and almost silent in another? And perhaps most importantly, if different people bring out different versions of you, which version is actually you? The myth of the single personality. We often talk about personality as if it were an object. Someone is an introvert, someone is confident, someone is a nice person, someone is serious, someone is funny, someone is difficult. These descriptions are useful, they help us communicate quickly, but they can also create an illusion. Imagine that personality is a house. The house has many rooms. One room contains your sense of humor. Another contains your ambition. Another contains your fear. Another contains your tenderness. Another contains your competitiveness. Another contains your need for approval. Another contains your curiosity. Different situations open different doors. When you are with someone you trust, the room containing your vulnerability may open easily. When you are with someone who constantly judges you, that door may slam shut. When you are competing with someone, your competitive side may become much louder. When you are caring for a child, you may suddenly become patient in ways you never knew you could be. None of these versions necessarily has to be fake. They are different parts of the same person. This is one reason personality psychology has moved away from the simplistic idea that people behave exactly the same way everywhere. People do have relatively stable traits. Some people really are more outgoing than others. Some are generally more organized, more anxious, more agreeable, or more open to new experiences. But traits describe tendencies. They do not dictate every moment. A person can be generally shy and still become extremely talkative around close friends. A generally calm person can lose their temper under enough pressure. A person who seems incredibly confident at work may feel insecure in romantic relationships. A quiet person may become the funniest person in the room when surrounded by people they trust. The contradiction is not necessarily evidence of inconsistency. It may be evidence that human behavior depends heavily on context, and context includes something we sometimes overlook: other people. The people around you are part of the situation. Think about how you behave when someone makes you feel completely safe. You probably do not monitor every sentence. You do not constantly wonder how your face looks. You do not replay every joke in your head before saying it. You may interrupt. You may speak in a strange voice. You may tell embarrassing stories. You may admit that you are scared. You may say things that would sound ridiculous to anyone else. Why? Because your brain has learned something important. I don't need to protect myself so much here. Now imagine the opposite. You are sitting across from someone who has criticized you repeatedly. Suddenly, ordinary conversation becomes complicated. Should I say this? Did that sound stupid? Why did they look at me like that? Maybe I should stop talking. Maybe they disagree. Maybe they are judging me. The external situation has changed, but something deeper has changed too. Your attention has shifted toward yourself. Instead of simply participating in the conversation, you are monitoring your own behavior. That can dramatically change how you act. The fascinating part is that the other person does not have to say anything. Your brain can learn the pattern from previous experiences. A certain person enters the room and your body remembers. You may become quieter before you consciously realize why. You may become defensive, you may start joking, you may become unusually agreeable. You may feel the urge to prove yourself. This is one reason relationships can feel almost magical or strangely oppressive. Other people do not merely observe our personalities. They help create the conditions under which different parts of our personalities appear. The hidden question behind social behavior. Whenever you meet another person, your mind is doing something remarkably complicated. It is trying to answer questions. Am I safe here? Do I belong? What does this person expect from me? How much can I reveal? Who has more power? What happens if they reject me? What kind of behavior works with this person? What happened last time? We usually do not consciously ask these questions. The brain handles much of this automatically. That is why you can enter a room and instantly sense that something is off without being able to explain exactly what. Humans are social animals. For most of our evolutionary history, belonging to a group was not simply emotionally pleasant. It could be tied directly to survival. Being rejected by a group could mean losing protection, food, cooperation, or access to resources. Modern life is very different. Being left out of a conversation is not the same as being abandoned in the wilderness. But the ancient machinery did not disappear. Our minds still care deeply about social acceptance. This helps explain why we change around different people. We are constantly adjusting our behavior to the social environment. Sometimes the adjustment is tiny. You speak more formally to a boss, you speak more casually with a friend, you use different vocabulary with a child, you behave differently at a funeral than at a party. Nobody would consider these changes dishonest. They are ordinary social intelligence. But the same mechanism can become much deeper. If you grew up learning that anger from a parent was dangerous, you may become extremely agreeable around angry people. If you learned that affection was conditional on achievement, you may become intensely competitive around successful people. If you were frequently mocked for being emotional, you may become emotionally distant around people you care about. In these cases, your personality is not simply changing. Your history is entering the room with you. Why you might become a different person around family. Family relationships are especially powerful because they often contain the oldest versions of ourselves. Imagine someone who is now 40 years old. At work, she is respected. She manages people. She makes decisions. People listen when she speaks. Then she visits her parents. Within 20 minutes, she finds herself defending decisions she made years ago. She becomes irritated when her mother gives unsolicited advice. She feels like her father does not take her seriously. Suddenly, she is arguing about something that happened when she was 17. From the outside, this might look irrational. Why would an accomplished adult suddenly behave like a teenager? Because family relationships are not based only on the present. They contain layers of memory. Your family may remember versions of you that nobody else has seen. They remember when you were helpless. They remember your mistakes. They remember your awkward phases. They may still treat you according to an old role, and you may unconsciously respond according to that role. Every family develops patterns. One child becomes the responsible one. Another becomes the difficult one. Another becomes the funny one. Another becomes the sensitive one. These labels can become surprisingly durable. Even when people grow up, the old pattern may remain. The responsible child may still feel guilty for relaxing. The rebellious child may still feel compelled to resist. The peacemaker may still feel responsible for everyone's emotions. The quiet child can continue staying silent even after becoming an adult. This does not mean families permanently determine personality. People can change, but old relationships can act like psychological time machines. They can pull us toward older versions of ourselves. Hashtag the strange power of expectations. There is another reason people behave differently around different people. We respond not only to what others do, but that we expect them to do. Suppose you believe someone thinks you are intelligent. You may speak with more confidence around them. Because you expect respect, you take more risks, you share more ideas, you ask better questions, you may even appear more intelligent. Now imagine that you believe someone thinks you are stupid. You become cautious, you hesitate, you second-guess yourself, you speak less, you make more mistakes because you are nervous. The person may then conclude that you really are less capable. A cycle has formed. Their behavior influences your expectations. Your expectations influence your behavior. Your behavior influences their response, and their response strengthens your original expectations. This kind of cycle can happen in friendships, families, classrooms, workplaces, and romantic relationships. It can create something that feels mysterious. Why am I so different around this person? The answer may be partly that you are responding to the version of yourself you believe they expect to see. And that leads to a much bigger idea. Sometimes another person does not simply reveal who you are. They influence who you become while you are with them, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Consider two teachers. One believes a student is capable but inexperienced. The teacher gives the student difficult questions, waits for answers, provides useful feedback, and expects improvement. The student gradually becomes more confident. Now imagine another teacher who assumes the student is lazy. The teacher gives fewer opportunities, expects less, becomes impatient, and interprets mistakes as evidence of laziness. The student begins participating less. The teacher sees this as confirmation. Neither teacher necessarily intended to create the outcome, but expectations changed behavior. This basic pattern can happen between adults too. If your partner expects you to be unreliable, they may constantly check what you are doing. You feel distrusted, you become defensive. You stop volunteering information because every explanation turns into an interrogation. Your partner sees your withdrawal and thinks, see, they are hiding something. The relationship gets worse. Now reverse the situation. Someone expects you to be trustworthy. They give you freedom. You feel respected. You are more likely to communicate openly. Their trust makes it easier for you to behave in trustworthy ways. This is why relationships can bring out surprisingly different versions of the same person. The question is not simply, who am I? Sometimes the more useful question is, who do I become around this person? The person who makes you feel small. Most people have encountered someone who changes their personality in an uncomfortable way. You might become quieter. You stop making jokes. You become nervous about expressing opinions. You apologize constantly. You explain yourself too much. You feel like everything you say could be used against you. And perhaps the strangest part is what happens after you leave. You suddenly feel normal again. You talk freely, you laugh, you have ideas. You realize you were not actually incapable of speaking. You were uncomfortable. This distinction matters. Sometimes we mistakenly treat the behavior we show around one person as proof of who we are. I'm not confident, maybe. Or maybe you are not confident around them. I'm bad at socializing. Maybe. Or maybe you are uncomfortable in certain social environments. I don't know how to speak up. Maybe. Or perhaps you have learned that speaking up around certain people leads to punishment, ridicule, or conflict. This does not mean every uncomfortable relationship is someone else's fault. Sometimes our own fears are responsible. But it is worth paying attention to patterns. If you feel confident around almost everyone except one particular person, that is information. If you feel exhausted after every interaction with someone, that is information. If you repeatedly become someone you do not recognize around a particular person, that is information too. Not necessarily proof of abuse, not necessarily proof that the other person is terrible, but information. Your behavior is telling you something about the relationship. Why we act differently around people we admire. There is another, more pleasant version of this phenomenon. Sometimes someone brings out a better version of you. You might have a friend who makes you curious. Around them, you read more, you ask questions, you become adventurous, you laugh more, or perhaps you know someone who is incredibly disciplined. Being around them makes you want to work harder. Someone else may make you more compassionate. Another person may make you more playful. This happens because behavior spreads socially. We observe other people, we imitate them, we absorb their standards, we adjust our own behavior based on what seems normal in their environment. If everyone around you exercises, exercising starts to feel ordinary. If everyone complains, complaining feels ordinary. If everyone is curious, curiosity becomes normal. If everyone is cruel, kindness may begin to feel strange. This means the people around us can influence not only how we behave, but what we consider normal. That is a powerful reason to pay attention to our social environment. You are not only choosing friends, in a subtle way, you are choosing which behaviors become familiar inside your own mind. The chameleon effect. There is a fascinating human tendency sometimes called the chameleon effect. The basic idea is simple. People often unconsciously imitate small aspects of the behavior of those around them. Someone crosses their legs and you do something similar. Someone speaks slowly and you slow down. Someone smiles frequently and you become more expressive. Someone uses certain phrases and you start using them too. This can happen without deliberate intention. Why? One explanation is that humans are naturally tuned to social coordination. Matching another person's rhythm can make interactions smoother. It signals familiarity. It can create a sense of connection. You can see this in ordinary conversations. Close friends often develop shared jokes, expressions, gestures, and even similar rhythms of speech. Couples sometimes begin sounding alike. Groups develop their own vocabulary. Families have their own strange language. None of this requires anyone to consciously decide, from now on I will copy this person's personality. The adaptation happens gradually, and it reveals something important. A person's identity is partly built through interaction. We become ourselves partly by being around other selves. But does this mean there is no real you? Here is where the question becomes philosophical. If you act differently with different people, perhaps there is no single authentic version of you. Maybe the idea of a fixed true self is simply too simplistic. Think about language. You might speak one way with a child, another way with a friend, and another way in a professional setting. But nobody asks which language is the real you. All of them are expressions of the same person. Personality can work in a similar way. The patient version of you is real, the angry version is real, the playful version is real, the serious version is real, the ambitious version is real, the frightened version is real, the loving version is real. Being different in different situations does not automatically make one version fake. The deeper question is whether you still have a sense of choice. There is a difference between I behave differently because different situations bring out different parts of me, and I have no idea what I think, want, or feel until I figure out what everyone else wants. The first can be healthy adaptation. The second can become a loss of identity. When adaptation becomes people-pleasing, imagine someone who is incredibly good at reading a room. They know exactly what people want. They know when to laugh. They know when to stay quiet. They know how to avoid conflict. They know how to make everyone comfortable. At first, this sounds like a social superpower, and sometimes it is. But imagine that the person rarely asks themselves what they want. Someone says, "Where should we eat?" They answer, "Whatever you want." A friend asks, "Do you want to go?" "Sure." A partner says, "Is this okay?" "Yeah." A colleague asks them to take on extra work. "Of course." Over time, the person may become extremely skilled at adapting to others while becoming strangely disconnected from themselves. This is one of the dangers of constant social adjustment. You can become so good at becoming what others need that you stop noticing your own preferences. And then a strange question appears. What do I actually want? The answer may not come easily. This is why authenticity does not necessarily mean behaving the same way with everyone. Authenticity is closer to being able to recognize your own values, feelings, boundaries, and preferences, even when you adapt your behavior to different situations. You can be polite without abandoning yourself. You can compromise without disappearing. You can change your tone without changing your values. You can listen to someone without agreeing with them. You can adapt without becoming invisible. The difference between social skill and self-erasure. There is nothing wrong with changing your behavior according to context. In fact, refusing to adapt can create its own problems. Imagine someone who speaks to their grandmother exactly the same way they speak to their best friend, or someone who treats a funeral like a comedy club because they believe being authentic means never changing behavior. That is not necessarily authenticity. It may simply be a failure to understand context. Healthy social behavior involves flexibility. You adjust your volume, you choose different words, you notice other people's feelings, you understand social boundaries, you learn what is appropriate. But there is a line. Healthy flexibility says, I can change how I express myself while remaining connected to who I am. Self-erasure says, I must become whatever this person wants, or I am not safe, loved, accepted, or valuable. Those are very different things. Why romantic relationships can change us so much. Few relationships reveal personality shifts as strongly as romantic relationships. Someone can be confident everywhere else and become deeply insecure with a romantic partner. Another person may be emotionally distant with friends, but incredibly affectionate with a partner. Someone who seems independent may suddenly become highly dependent. Someone who rarely gets jealous may become jealous in a particular relationship. Why? Because romantic relationships activate powerful emotional systems. They involve closeness, vulnerability, trust, fear of rejection, expectations, and uncertainty. They can also awaken old relationship patterns. For example, someone who learned early in life that affection could disappear unexpectedly may become extremely alert to changes in a partner's mood. A delayed text can feel enormous. A slightly different tone can feel threatening. A partner's independence may be interpreted as rejection. Another person with a different history may experience the same behavior as completely normal. This does not mean every relationship reaction comes from childhood. Adults are complex. Current circumstances matter too. The quality of the relationship matters. The other person's behavior matters. But our history can influence what situations mean to us. Two people can experience the same event and react completely differently because their minds assign different meanings to it. The past is not gone. Just because it happened long ago. Imagine you touch a hot stove once. Years later, you see a similar stove. You do not need to touch it again to remember. Your brain learned something. Social experiences can work in a similar way. Suppose someone once embarrassed you badly in front of a group. Years later, you are asked to speak publicly. You may feel nervous even though nobody in the room has threatened you. Your body remembers the pattern. This is not mystical. Learning changes the brain. Past experiences can shape expectations, attention, habits, and emotional reactions. But the important point is that memory is not destiny. A learned response can change. People can have new experiences. They can develop new relationships. They can discover that situations they once feared are not always dangerous. This is one reason a person can seem like a completely different version of themselves later in life. They may not have found their true personality. They may simply have learned new ways of responding. The strange case of confidence. Confidence is a particularly good example. Imagine two people entering a room. Both are equally intelligent. Both know what they want to say, as one has spent years in environments where their opinions were welcomed. The other has spent years being interrupted. The first person speaks. The second hesitates. Someone interrupts the second person. They stop. Now imagine the first person and the second person switch environments. The second person enters a room where people listen carefully. They are encouraged to speak. Their ideas are taken seriously. At first, they are cautious. Then something changes. They speak more. They become more comfortable. They start contributing. Eventually, people might describe them as confident. Was confidence hiding inside them all along? Possibly. But the environment helped make that confidence usable. This is why personality cannot always be understood by looking only inside someone's head. Human behavior emerges from the interaction between the person and the environment. Change the environment, and sometimes you change the behavior dramatically. The person you are alone. If other people influence us so strongly, perhaps the closest thing to a true self is the person we become when nobody is watching. But even that is more complicated than it sounds. When you are alone, you are still influenced by your memories, habits, culture, expectations, and imagined judgments. You may hear the voice of someone who criticized you. You may imagine what your friends would think. You may practice conversations that never happen. You may feel guilty for resting because you were taught that productivity equals worth. So even solitude contains other people. The human mind is social enough that we carry relationships inside us. This is one reason a person can feel watched even when nobody is there. Not literally watched, psychologically watched. We have internalized expectations. We have learned what is considered acceptable. We have absorbed voices. Sometimes the voice criticizing you is no longer the voice of another person. It has become your own. Why different friends can create different versions of you. Think about your friendships. There may be one friend you always joke with, another you talk to about serious problems, another you call when you want adventure, another you discuss ideas with for hours, another knows your emotional side. If someone followed you around for a month and observed only one friendship, they might build a surprisingly incomplete picture of you. They might think this person is always sarcastic, or this person is incredibly serious, or this person is extremely adventurous. They would be describing a real part of you, but not the whole thing. This is why people sometimes say things like, "My friends from different parts of my life have never met. I wonder what they would think of each other." It can feel almost like maintaining separate characters, but often it is simply because different relationships provide different emotional environments. One friend gives your humor room to grow. Another gives your vulnerability room. Another gives your ambition room. Another gives your curiosity room. The differences can be healthy. In fact, having multiple social environments can help prevent one relationship from defining your entire identity. The darker possibility. What if someone controls which version appears? Now imagine a relationship in which another person gradually learns exactly what makes you change. They know which words make you insecure. They know which subjects make you defensive. They know how to make you apologize. They know how to make you doubt yourself. They know what praise makes you dependent on their approval. This is different from ordinary social influence. All relationships influence us, but influence can become control. If someone repeatedly uses fear, humiliation, manipulation, threats, or isolation to shape your behavior, the fact that you become different around them may be a warning sign. The problem is not that your personality changes. The problem is that your freedom to choose your behavior is being reduced. This is an important distinction. Healthy relationships influence us. Unhealthy relationships can condition us. Healthy influence expands who you can be. Manipulation tends to shrink who you feel allowed to be. Why we sometimes become more childlike around certain people. Have you ever noticed that you become unusually playful around one person? You make silly noises, you laugh at stupid things, you become spontaneous, you act younger. This can happen because some relationships reduce self-monitoring. You feel safe enough to stop performing adulthood for a moment. There's something deeply human about this. Adults spend much of their lives regulating themselves. Be professional, be polite, control your emotions, make good decisions. Do not embarrass yourself. Do not say the wrong thing. Then you find someone with whom you can simply be ridiculous. That can feel like relief. The childlike version of you is not necessarily immature. Play is an important part of human behavior. It helps people connect, explore, experiment, and relax. Sometimes the safest relationship is the one where you can temporarily stop trying to look impressive. Why we become more serious around other people. The opposite can happen too. Someone enters the room and suddenly you become extremely serious. Perhaps they represent authority. Perhaps you admire them. Perhaps you are afraid of disappointing them. Perhaps you associate them with achievement. The body reacts before the conscious mind catches up. You sit differently. You speak differently. You become more controlled. This is one reason power changes behavior. A person can be funny and relaxed with their friends, then almost completely transform when speaking to someone who controls their job, reputation, money, or opportunities. The same human being is still there, but the stakes have changed. And when the stakes change, behavior changes. The brain is trying to predict what happens next. At a deeper level, one way to understand all of this is to think of the brain as a prediction system. Your mind is constantly trying to anticipate what will happen next. If I say this, how will they respond? If I disagree, will there be conflict? If I joke, will they laugh? If I ask for help, will they reject me? If I show emotion, will they judge me? These predictions are based partly on the current situation and partly on previous experiences. When your prediction is that a person is safe, you may relax. When your prediction is that a person is dangerous, judgmental, unpredictable, or powerful, you may become cautious. This happens quickly, often before conscious thought. That is why you may say, I don't know why, but I just act differently around them. Your conscious mind may not know. Your accumulated experience may. So which version is the real you? Now we can return to the original question. Which version is the real you? The simplest answer is all of them. But that answer needs an important qualification. You are not merely whatever you happen to do in a particular moment. A momentary behavior does not define your entire personality. At the same time, your personality is not a completely fixed object that exists independently of relationships. You are a person with tendencies, values, memories, habits, and possibilities. Different situations activate different parts of that system. Think of a musical instrument. The instrument has a particular range, but different people can play different melodies on it. The melody changes, the instrument remains. But even that metaphor is imperfect because humans can learn. A person can develop new capacities. A shy person can become more socially comfortable. A defensive person can become more open. A people pleaser can learn to set boundaries. A person who once avoided conflict can learn to tolerate disagreement. A person who believed they were incapable can discover that they are not. We are not finished products. We are adaptable systems. The question that may matter more than who am I? Instead of asking which version of me is real, try asking which relationships bring out parts of me that I want to strengthen. That question is much more useful. Who makes you more curious? Who makes you more honest? Who makes you laugh? Who makes you feel safe enough to disagree? Who makes you feel like you can think clearly? Who encourages you to become more courageous? And then ask the opposite. Who makes you constantly monitor yourself? Who makes you afraid to speak? Who makes you feel that your worth depends on pleasing them? Who makes you smaller? Who makes you abandon your values? The goal is not to find people who always make you comfortable. Sometimes growth is uncomfortable. A good friend may challenge you. A partner may point out something you do not want to hear. A mentor may demand more from you. Discomfort alone is not a warning sign. The deeper question is what the relationship does to your sense of self over time. Does it help you expand, or does it make you disappear? Maybe personality is more like a dance. There's an interesting metaphor for all of this. Imagine two dancers. Neither dancer performs exactly the same way with every partner. One partner is fast, another is slow. One is playful, another is precise. The dancer adjusts. Does that mean the dancer has no style? No. The dancer's style exists partly in the way they respond to different partners. Human personality may work in a similar way. You are not simply a fixed character walking through a world of interchangeable people. You are a participant in relationships, and relationships are interactive. Your behavior changes theirs. Their behavior changes yours. The pattern between you becomes something neither person creates alone. This helps explain why you can meet someone new and think, I don't know who I am around this person yet. You are discovering the relationship. You are discovering which parts of yourself emerge, and they are doing the same. The most interesting part, other people can reveal possibilities you didn't know existed. There is something hopeful hidden inside all of this. If people can bring out different versions of us, then perhaps we are capable of more versions than we realize. Maybe you are not just shy. Maybe there are environments where you are expressive. Maybe you are not just undisciplined. Maybe there are goals that make discipline feel meaningful. Maybe you are not just serious. Maybe there are people who make your playful side feel safe. Maybe you are not just angry. Maybe there are relationships where you do not feel the need to defend yourself. Sometimes we discover ourselves through other people. A person can show you that you are funnier than you thought. Someone can make you realize that you enjoy teaching. Someone can make you comfortable enough to admit that you are afraid. Someone can challenge you until you discover that you are stronger than you believed. In that sense, relationships do not merely reflect identity, they can help build it. But there is a final problem. If other people can bring out different versions of us, then we have to be careful about something. We can start confusing familiarity with identity. Suppose you have spent 10 years being the responsible person. Everyone depends on you. You solve problems. You never complain. People say, you're just naturally responsible. Eventually, you believe it. Then one day you become exhausted. You want someone else to take care of things. You want to make a mistake. You want to be irresponsible for an afternoon. It feels strange. You might think, this isn't me. But perhaps it is you too. Maybe you simply never gave that part of yourself much room. This happens with many identities. The strong one, the funny one, the quiet one, the successful one, the independent one, the nice one, the difficult one, the smart one, the failure, the victim, the caretaker, the rebel. Once a social role becomes familiar, we may protect it even when it no longer fits. Other people expect a certain version of us, so we continue providing it, not because we consciously choose to, because it has become automatic. You may be more flexible than you think. Human beings often underestimate their capacity for change because we experience ourselves from the inside. We remember our past, we recognize our habits, we feel continuous, so we assume that we have always been the same. But ask someone who knew you 10 years ago. They may laugh. You used to be so different, and they may be right. You may have changed because your circumstances changed, because you met different people, because you lost someone, because you became responsible for someone else, because you traveled, because you failed, because you succeeded, because you became less afraid of rejection, because you finally experienced a relationship in which you felt safe. Sometimes personality changes slowly. Sometimes one experience changes the way we see ourselves. And sometimes the person who changes us is simply someone who treats us differently from what we expected. A person who listens when everyone else interrupted. A person who trusts us when we expected suspicion. A person who respects a boundary when we expected anger. Those experiences can create new predictions, and new predictions can create new behavior.